Right. As I've already said, we are about to start with the recording of our content today. For this, let me share my screen. Share. And maybe you can give me a short hint if you can.
So, move to Cloud ERP, a practical guide. Welcome to our next session. And I just want you to take note of our disclaimer and what's the session about. So, selective data transition, project execution, what needs to be considered. So, this is a topic for today. And I'm not alone on stage, so I have a couple of colleagues with me. My name is Krischer from CBS. I'm the Global Head of Landscape Transformation at CBS. And today with me I have two leading experts from the area of selective data transition. And let me introduce you to my left, Koustubh Waikar, Head of Global Customer Engagement at SAP DMLT Services. And on the left-hand side, Klaus, Wesp, Director Transformation Advisory from S&P. So we are your speakers for today, and you may wonder why we selected those two speakers for the session. In the end, a couple of years ago, SAP founded the so-called Selective Data Transition Engagement, a group of experts driving this initiative to bring customers to SAP S/4HANA forward, making it easier, reduce risk, set standards and methodology. And this is why we are here today. If you look at the customer logos, you see 4 companies. So today it's only the 3 of us. And Naturian will be our guest speaker in some other sessions here. But now let's get started and have a look into the agenda. So, selective data transition projects can be quite different to what you are used to when you do classical rollout or new implementation projects, and this is something that we want to talk about today. And as a starting point, we would briefly bring you back to the topic, what different paths do we have to move customers from ECC to S/4HANA. After that, we will focus on the selective data transition approach itself and discuss the main topics that need to be considered when you move from ECC to S/4HANA using this approach. Finally, we will give you some hints about key success factors, what needs to be done, what we are going to do to bring such projects to a success. And we are going to end with a brief Q&A session answering all the questions that you have. As said, we would like to start with a brief explanations on the transition scenarios. And you know, on the left-hand side, you see brownfield system conversion. On the right-hand side, you see greenfield new implementation. In the middle, there is this SDT thing sitting. And Koustubh will give us a more detailed explanation what these 3 approaches are about.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Hello, everybody. I would continue and give you a bit of a walkthrough of what these transition scenarios are. So typically, to set the context, we're talking about SAP ECC customers who are on ECC system and looking forward to transition to S/4HANA. And we have typically 3 transition options for our customers. As Benjamin said, on the left-hand side, we have a brownfield conversion, or what we call as a select system conversion. So this is really taking your existing ECC system and converting it as it is to S/4HANA. This is what we call as a brownfield conversion. On the extreme right, we have greenfield conversion. This is where we really start from scratch to set up a new S/4HANA system with completely different processes, configuration, and really start from scratch. So that's why this transition option is called a greenfield transition scenario. The topic of our interest and a focus of today is the selective data transition approach, which is in the middle, which is somewhere we can call it as a hybrid between a brownfield and greenfield approach. The selective data transition itself has 2 flavors within itself. There is a shell conversion version or a flavor of selective data transition, and there's another one called as mix and match flavor of selective data transition. A shell conversion approach is typically used when our customers see a need that they would like to bring in majority or most of the existing processes and configuration from ECC to S/4HANA, but need a choice on changing some processes and selectively bringing some data. A mix and match scenario is a scenario where the customers predominantly would like to go for a greenfield approach, but still want to cherry pick and bring some of the processes and configuration from ECC. So that's predominantly the main differentiating factor between a shell conversion SDT approach versus a mix and match approach. What we have on the slide is, on the left hand side, we see different dimensions which help us to really identify what type of a scenario would be more suitable for a specific customer's transition requirement. So the first dimension we have is the system. In case of a brownfield conversion, what we do is we take an existing ECC system, and the same system is converted as it is to S/4HANA. So it's actually the same system with the same system ID. In case of a shell conversion SDT scenario, the idea here is we create a shell or an empty container from an ECC system, which will bring in all of the existing configuration. And here there is a possibility to eliminate some unused configuration or custom code, and then this starts to become as a baseline to set up the target system. In this case, obviously it's a new system, it's not an existing ECC system, it's a new system created from an empty container or a shell that we have. Now when we look at a mix and match scenario, here we predominantly start from a new S/4HANA system with basically an empty new system. There is a possibility you can get the best practice content, and additionally you have a choice to cherry pick and bring in some configuration, but predominantly it's a new S/4HANA system, which is also the case with a system with a new implementation scenario. This would be a fresh new S/4HANA system that would be there. Now in terms of speed of transition, I think this is also one important aspect for our customers to understand, considering the fact that now 2027 is the end of timeline for maintenance from SAP for ECC. Typically the speed of transition from ECC to S/4HANA is considered to be the highest with the system conversion scenario, which may not always be true in all scenarios, but considering a typical project planning, the business involvement aspects are pretty low. You take a system, it's kind of a technical upgrade, so the transition is perceived to be, the speed of transition is perceived to be the highest. Then in case of shell conversion approach, it is also very high, but if there would be topics of discussion with business users, which processes you would like to keep, which processes you would like to eliminate, if there are obsolete custom code and data that should not be brought in, so there are possibilities of tailoring and configuring. So obviously that would need some time to get inputs from the different stakeholders, so the speed of transition is considered moderate to high. A mix and match scenario, obviously here we predominantly start from a greenfield setup, but cherry pick and bring in some of the critical processes and configuration from ECC. So the time to identify which processes are really required from business and then really bringing them process to set up the system is a bit higher. So it's moderate to low, that's the speed of transition. And the speed of transition is typically lowest when you go for a new implementation scenario. Another important aspect to consider is by default the nature of possibility of having a clean core adoption. So the clean core adoption is the lowest in case of a system conversion scenario, because here you take an existing system as it is from ECC and convert it to S/4HANA. So if this system has been old, has been being used over the last 10 plus years, there is a possibility it has a lot of custom code, customizations in there. So the clean core adoption by default is low, and there needs to be explicit measures to identify and clean it. The possibility of clean core adoption with the shell conversion approach is relatively higher. When you create a shell, you have a possibility to identify and delete obsolete custom code from the system. You also have a possibility to delete unrelevant or not used user exits, enhancement spots which are no longer required, so those could be eliminated. So the clean core adoption by default is considered moderate. Compared to that, when you look into the right-hand side, the mix and match scenario, we start with a fresh install of a new S4HANA system. So by default, it starts with a clean slate. So the clean core adoption is high. And same is the case with greenfield scenario. The clean core adoption is very high because you're completely starting from scratch. Now let's look into the next dimension that we have, which is the level of process transformations that are possible when a customer transitions from ECC to S4HANA. As you're taking an existing system and converting it in the brownfield scenario, by default, the only process transformations that would happen would be the mandatory process changes that are required or enforced by the system conversion scenario. But pretty much that's all when it comes to process transformations. You take existing business processes as it is, look into the mandatory simplifications, and those are the process changes. In case of shell conversion scenario, you do have a possibility to do moderate process changes. There would be some critical business processes that I would like to keep as it is, and some processes would like to be changed, which are obsolete or need simplification to leverage innovations in future. So this is where the possibility of process transformation is moderate. In case of mix and match, you obviously start with a best practice of model content from S4HANA new instance. You do have a possibility to bring in some of the required processes and config from your ECC. So the process transformations are considered relatively higher. And with new implementation, obviously, it allows you the possibility to completely redesign your processes. So the level of process transformation is very high. Now getting into the next and important topic about is the scope of data that is possible to be migrated in each of these scenarios. Here we have classified the data into 4 different categories: configuration data, master data, open transaction data, and historical transaction data which is closed. In case of a system conversion, you would take everything as it is, so everything that you have in the system is available by default in your S4HANA system. The benefit of selective data transition approach with the shell conversion scenario is you have a possibility to exclude configuration for not relevant entities, for example, company codes. So if you have some company codes which are obsolete, you have a possibility to eliminate or remove configuration for unused obsolete entities. Same is the case with master data. Inactive master data can be eliminated or filtered out, not taking this to S4HANA system. You always take all open transactions, and also with historical data, there are possibility to reduce and only bring in limited historical data with a shell conversion scenario. In case of a mix and match scenario, you really bring in specific configuration, the only for corresponding to the limited processes that you want to bring in from ECC. So the migration of configuration is extremely limited. You obviously have to bring in all the active master data that you want to bring in from your ECC system. You bring in all open transactions, and you still have a possibility to bring specific closed transactions. Typical examples are plant maintenance history, production planning historical data. So these are some common examples where customers would like to selectively bring in closed historical data. In case of a new implementation scenario, since you start from scratch, you do not bring in or do not have a possibility to bring in any configuration from ECC. You really start from scratch. You bring in the required master data and only open transactions. And the last point is the possibility of how do you go live. We call it rollout approach. Do you do big bang, which is like completely taking existing system, all entities going live at once, or do you do it in phases? With system conversion, you only have an option of doing a big bang or just one full system conversion. In case of SDT with shell conversion option, you have both options to do a big bang conversion, or you could go live in phases. Same is the case with a mix and match scenario or with greenfield, where you could have a possibility to either go for a big bang or do a phased go lives with multiple, the go live split into multiple phases. And I would invite my colleague Klaus to
just one question from my side, but it's also possible to go, let's say, in different sections. Let's say FI 2 years. Selective data migration does not mean selective data only for a fixed time zone, yeah,
Yes.
you can decide what you want to do.
Absolutely.
You can decide, okay, well, FI, maybe the fiscal years you need, yeah, and in other modules, for example, in plant maintenance, you can say, okay, I want to have the complete history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you definitely do have a possibility to identify the scope of historical data that is required, and this could further be split down either based on modules, or you could also drill down to object level. Could be purchase orders, you want 3 years history, finance documents 2 years history, sales documents 1 year history. So there are all these different possible combinations when you in terms of defining what level of historical data would be required.
Yeah, exactly. So, Klaus, thanks for bringing this up in addition. And who got a quite comprehensive explanation, and I think we really nailed it down to the main topics that need to be known by you when you think about what will be your wide approach. And we ended up with thinking about, okay, when you go up for a selective data transition project, we can go live in phases or in a big bang approach. And now Klaus will walk us through the details for those 2 scenarios.
I would say in standard we will try to do a big bang, because it's easier for us, because it's just migrating the system, selecting the data, migrating the data to the new system. And as mentioned before, it's a new empty shell. That means we have a system, it's an empty shell, and then we can migrate the data in. In case of migrating table-based, we are very fast. That means SDT products help us to migrate the data very fast, not to post, just to migrate and bring the data in and never touch the target the source system. That's very important. But in some cases, the customer or our customers have the problem that it's not possible to do it on one weekend. Maybe because of the size. We have customers with 50 terabyte or 60 terabyte. And it's not possible to migrate 60 terabyte on one weekend. Other customers says, okay, we have more than 12,000 users in different countries. We cannot train them. We cannot train them and bring them to S/4HANA on the same weekend. Other customers says we have more than 2,000 interfaces. We cannot switch the interfaces. We can do it from technical point of view. We can do it, but maybe some customers don't have the possibility to do it on one weekend. And that's why we have also to create a wave concept. A wave concept means splitting a system in several waves and migrate it to S4. This is not the easy way. It's also a little bit more, let's say, important in case of handling the master data. Which system is responsible for master data from the first migration? Let's just imagine we have the first wave. Maybe it's a simple wave, just the smallest companies. Also in the wave concept, we decide which one should be the best. The largest, the smallest, the easiest, the modernest, or like that. And then we have to migrate the data. And from the first time on, we have to decide how to handle master data. That means in this case, we have customers who have to implement MDG just for the migration phase, and then switch it off again after the migration. Or we have to decide when the first company is going in the wave to S/4HANA, the first company is responsible for master data. But in this case, all the users which are responsible for master data have to switch on the same weekend. And this is very, very important to understand what a wave concept means. And then if you see that we are migrating table-based, that means we have also to decide how to handle the data when the system is all filled. That means we have to decide maybe how to handle upgrade in the S/4HANA system during the waves. Then you have to decide how to handle this. And it's very important. And that's why we from SDT and all the companies sitting here are responsible and helping the customers to migrate, to find the best way how to do this. Maybe it's simpler to reduce the data and make a pre or after go live migration, or to do a wave concept, or do a simple go live over the weekend. But to be honest, we have customers which are telling us we have only 8 hours for migration of 50 terabyte. That's not possible. and you have to find a concept how to migrate them. And this is what SDT is doing.
Perfect. Thank you, Klaus. So that's about the phased go-live concept. And I think we missed one thing. What about going live application by application? So starting with an finance first and then do logistics afterwards. So how are we going to handle that one? Is this something that we typically do, that we propose to our customers, or is this nothing that is really interesting for us?
We try to avoid, but we have to do this, of course, yeah. In some cases, we have to do it, let's say, finance first and logistics later. When we do this migration, it's clear that we have to implement interfaces between ECC and S4. That means in this case, we have to implement interfaces and to handle these systems are talking with the other system, and the same as master data. The same is then for customers, for vendors, for materials, and also for documents. So that means it's a wave concept. It can be splitted, but it's not from our point of view. It's not the best idea, but it can be done.
Okay, so that technically it can be done, and you may see at the bottom of the slide. This is the official SAP talking point to phased go-lives by application, so SAP is not recommending it. Yep. Same for Klaus and myself. Typically we are saying don't do that. Why not? Because as Klaus explained, it's making things much more complex than when you do it by company code per company code, or really in a big bang approach. That's completely different to you when you think about a new implementation project where this completely makes sense, really to start one by one, and not for selective data transitions in the end, so please keep that in mind. Okay, so that was Wave Big Bang. One of the main questions or the main cornerstones that we see is what needs to be considered before we start an SDT project. Are there pre-projects that need to be done? What is all the stuff that needs to start before we really go on with the start of an SDT project? Typically, what do we need to consider here? So the first thing is that we need, before we start the project itself, we need a pretty clear picture about the approach and the scope of the project. So what should be content, what should be part of a selective data transition approach? Which harmonizations? Will it be a phased go live, a big bang go live? Are we going to move out some data? Which should be taken over? What should be left behind? What is the basic system setup? So that's really the starting point where we need some clarity before we go into the implementation as for an SDT project. You should also be clear that doing an SDT project is always a business project. So it's not about technology and IT. For sure, we need that as well. But in the end, the majority of our projects are combining business harmonizations. We talked about going to clean core, moving old things out, and doing harmonizations. So that is something that is always driven by the business. So if you think about doing an SDT project, always think about this as a business project and not as a technical project that this needs to be done. Okay, that's one thing.
I think the main difference between a brownfield project and a SDT project is that you're working on an empty shell. That means you can combine all your requirements you have to do in the project. You don't have to run pre-projects. You can do it in the same step. You can do a new GL implementation, let's say also document splitting, a new ledger change, you can change things because you are working on an empty shell and never touch the source system. That's the most important thing. That means in this case, you can combine projects and do it in one.
Exactly.
And this reduces the effort for testing. And it's very important. The testing effort for the business, it's not a pre-project. Yeah? You can do it in one project.
Exactly. So you really nailed down one of the main important things. We can avoid pre-projects when doing a selective data transition thing. And one of the critical questions we always ask when it comes to combining several projects into one, it's not the question if it can be done technically, It's only about the availability of your organization, of our customers' organization, if they can handle all these changes in one big project. So this is the limiting factor, and not the technology capabilities that we bring with us. And having the right partner with the right project approach, we are pretty good in combining several things and really running many initiatives in one project, and assuring that this will end up in a successful go-live afterwards. Okay, so this was about project types, project setup. Let's talk a little bit about the data that is going to be brought over. Koustubh, so what about data?
Thank you, Benjamin. This is really the most, one of the key critical aspects for customers to really decide whether SDT as a transition scenario would be required if there is a need for migrating historical data. Because if you're really talking about bringing only master data and open items, then new implementation is a better suitable option because it allows you to do more process changes. But we see a lot of customers, and the number and the demand for SDT being increasingly getting higher and higher, is our customers have done investments on their processes, the customizations that they want, and these are critical business processes, and there is critical need for bringing historical data into S/4HANA. So this is really a key aspect for customers to determine before starting a project. Do we have a need to migrate historical data, and how much of historical data is required to be migrated? As we discussed earlier in the session, we do have possibilities to bring in specific history. It could be based on time, 1 year, 2 year history. It could be based on active company codes. For example, there are some entities which are obsolete or divested. You don't want to bring that data, so those could be left behind. And below, going further deep down, there are possibilities to really go at object level and determine what historical data at what object level do you want to bring in. So this is a key aspect to really identify where the historical data can be migrated, and then the team who works on configuring the tool would define what we call as selection rules at module level and at object level to determine how to filter the data and what data should be migrated. One important aspect, which is a key differentiator between the SDT or the selective data transition approach compared to a system conversion or a new implementation, is the data is migrated directly at table level, which means at a database level. So it is selected from your source system based on filter rules and directly migrated and updated into the target system. This approach allows to migrate high volume historical data in a very short downtime. And this also allows you to bring in existing historical transaction data as it is from your source system to your target system. So if you have a purchase order with a specific number, the exact same purchase order would be available into the target system because you're taking the data directly at database table level into the target system.
Klaus, one more thing. Many customers ask us about, hey, do I need to archive my data before in selective data transition approach? Do I have to set up archiving? So what's our answer on that one?
I would say, first of all, it's not necessary to archive data because we migrate the data we need. If we can bring the data, when the old system is still running later on, then we can also say, okay, I want to migrate the last fiscal year and then the rest is in the old system. The main difference between let's say a migration and SDT is that we can do it in the middle of the year. That means we can migrate in the middle of the year backwards, as far as we want to go back. And archiving is necessary when we, let's say, for example, in the industry, like airplanes and so on, then you have to keep the data for 30 years. In other, let's say, business areas like pharma, you have to keep it as long as the medicine is running. So that means archiving depends on the product, depends on the business.
Okay, perfect, colleagues. So the next thing that we would like to look at is project approach and project phases. The good news is, all of you should know the SAP Activate methodology, and even if we started talking about the selective data transition projects are a bit different to normal SAP projects. The good news is that we are walking through exactly the same phases that you have in each and every SAP project. So we start with the preparation phase, where we build the project organization, project governance, the overall project organization, the high-level targets, and then we move over into the explore phase, where we really define the target picture, the target setups with people from the functional side, process experts, also from data migration point of view. We are looking into that one, really to nail down the scope that will be implemented during the realization phase and have a clear picture about what needs to be done. And the explore phase is, from our point of view, that's the most important thing. So we see projects are running smooth when we end up the explore phase with a pretty clear picture what needs to be done. In some cases, we see projects and customers struggling with something like a 60–70% picture of what needs to be done after the explore phase, and then start with the realization stuff. And this always ends up with hurdles and hurries during the project, so that's not the best idea. So from our point of view, really try to bring everything that you want to do and the certainty that you're doing the right things into the explore phase to be sure this is the scope for my implementation project. And then you have a perfectly good start to start with the realization stuff. And then it comes to some technical stuff like setting up the project landscape, transport routes and all that stuff. And then we will start with the implementation for additional customization, changes of customization, and for sure the transformation logic will be set up. Testing will take place, and that's also one of the major success factors here, because due to the fact that we bring over massive amounts of data, all this data needs to be checked against if it's valid. Do we have still the same figures on the system? Are all processes touching old data that we have migrated are still working the way we want it to be? So testing is really one of the additional key success factors that we see here. And finally, if you made it through 2 or 3 rounds of testing, then you are good to go, and then we will start with the deploy phase. The cutover will start, and we will bring over the data from the old system to the new one. So that's all the magic. This was about project phases. Let's dig a little bit more into project roles and people that need to be part of this project. So what skills do I need? Is it something where I just need my IT guys or some basis people? And as we already said, if you're used to do new implementations or rollout projects, doing an SDT project is a little bit different. So first thing, and I think I said it at the very beginning, an SDT project is not an IT project. It's always a business project. So key success factor is really having business experts, process experts with us, defining the scope, looking into all the details, and assuring that the things that we are going to do are the right things, and the decisions what to do and not what to do need to be done by business people in the end and not by IT people. So if you go forward with an SDT project, bring all the necessary business people, the process experts into the project team to assure that everything will work the way we want it to be. So that's in regards to project staffing, people on projects. That's my main message here. Anything to add? Or was it fine from your point of view?
It's pretty comprehensive in my view.
Okay, perfectly.
First of all, I would say we need also IT because
sure.
It's very important. If you have this empty shell, yeah, you have the problem that you have to implement dual maintenance. That means now you have running an old system and a new system. The new system is a shell copy. It's an empty shell, just repository and customizing, and then you have to implement a dual maintenance phase, because until they go live, it's allowed to change the productive system. And it's very important to have here IT very, very intensive included to check it, and maybe we could make a stop before the go live simulation and go live, and no changes between the last 4 weeks. And this is very important. And you're right. It's a combination between business and IT, but the business should drive the processes. The business should drive the changes.
Exactly. Yeah. And and this is a perfect move over to the next step. So key success factors. So I talked about project organization, project staffing, and Klaus already started to talk about the next things. You started with dual maintenance. We have some more things, and maybe let's walk through this 5 boxes, box per box. And Koustubh, do you want to start with project governance?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the key important success factor to ensure that a selective data transition project is successful is to really have a strong and a robust project governance. I mean, as Benjamin and Klaus already mentioned, it's really important to understand, unlike a system conversion project, it's not an IT project that you take everything and convert, and the IT and the basis team are working on it, and the functional guys are only involved for MIT and user acceptance testing. That's definitely not the case. Here we are talking about selectively migrating data, process transformations, where all stakeholders, business users, functional teams, business IT, basis teams, sometimes shared centers, users are services centers users are also required to be brought in. Now, when we look at a customer environment, these are really distributed functions and offices, sometimes physically, also distributed across different locations. These team members and their inputs are really required to be really consistent and firm. So a key aspect of having a strong project governance is to really hold the scope or really have a clear scope definition, and that should not evolve or change continuously as you proceed into the project in subsequent test cycles. Important aspect to consider here is we define the scope upfront and then stick to the scope and then proceed with the data filtering and data transformations and validate it. This is really an important aspect to have a clear scope definition defined and also holding and keeping that scope firm. Having a dedicated project team is also extremely important for such a project, not only from the service delivery partner who is supporting with the delivery of the project, but also from the customer side. Having a dedicated project manager, dedicated IT architect, business owners for different functions, and really having a virtual or a dedicated team, but a fixed team is really important. Change management is another important aspect to be considered, because once the scope is defined and we proceed, things that need to be avoided should be avoided, like intermediate release upgrades, technical releases, or adding rollouts of new functionalities or new plans while the project is going on. Changes to project scope and activities definitely need to be really deliberately looked into and reviewed and approved. So potentially having a strong project governance resulting into having a clear and concise scope and sticking to it as a part of the project are some of the key aspects that are important.
Okay, thank you, Koustubh. And Klaus, you already started talking about dual maintenance. One thing that our customers is always asking is, do I need a freeze period of several months or a year? So how can I keep my new S4 system that's still within implementation and my up and running live ERP system in sync? And one term that is always in mind of people is retrofitting. So probably you can dig a little bit into those two items.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I want to start with what you mentioned before, the cutover time and the downtime. In general, we talk about the downtime, and when we say the downtime is technical, I would say 50% of the downtime we are needing for migrating the data, and the other 50% are preparation and after switching the interfaces, because interfaces have to be switched afterwards. That means I would say when we talk about downtime, when the customer, or when our customers tell us they want to migrate in 8 hours, then we have only 4. This is very important. It's the half. The second one is dual maintenance. From my point of view, it's very interesting to understand that we have an empty shell. The empty shell is a copy of the existing system upgraded to S4. And then we have now 2 systems running. One is the future productive system, and the other one is the running productive system. And then we migrate the data, and they have to be in sync. That means dual maintenance means that each transport going to the existing system, for example, a new company code or changing of a chart of account or something like that, have also been transported to the new S4HANA system, and they have to be kept in sync. This can be done by the Solman or by Solman feature, or can be done manually. If one guy of IT management is doing this manually, there are two options. But the systems have to be in sync, because when we do the data migration, then we have to migrate the data, and they have to be in the right shape as in the old and the new system. Testing, okay, I think we don't have to talk about testing, because testing.
So mainly testing is one of the key success factors here.
I know, but I think we don't have to talk about that, because every of our SAP users know what testing means, yeah. And the most important thing is we need the people who have no time. We need the right ones, and not the people with time. We need the people who know the business. We need the user who know the business, the user who know how to run the business and to know how to check the result. And this is the problem in the project, as you mentioned before, to find the right ones. The right ones are the ones which have no time.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
All good, but maybe let's come back to testing with one question, what we usually see. So typically when we go for an SDT project, it takes something 9 to 12, 15 months or whatever. So that's the general project duration. How much testing time does it need? So is it from day on that people need to test, or when we look into the test phases that we mentioned, how long does it usually take to test everything that we need to be tested?
Okay, first of all, you mentioned before the phases of a project, yeah? And I will say that the first test migration is the most important one. We have to find the issues in the first and second test migration, and not 5 minutes before go live. Yeah, this is also very important in the head of the project members, yeah? That it's maybe 9 months until go live, but it's now important to find the issues now, and not 5 minutes before go live.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you mentioned early testing is quite a big success factor,
yeah. But
how long does a test cycle last? No? So do the business people need to test for 3 months, or how long does it usually take?
I would say it takes 5 to 6 weeks for the test cycles, yeah. And if the project is very short, yeah, you can overlap the phases. You can say, okay, I have one system, they are still testing. I build up a new system, a second one, and we are migrating then and bringing then the new issues in, and then we have the second one, yeah, to overlap the phases, yeah. But it's 4 to 6 weeks for testing.
Okay, perfectly good. So as you see, not too long, so I think it can be done by business users to do 4 to 6 weeks testing in a 12 months project, and 2 or 3 test iterations. Klaus started talking about downtime, cutover, saying, hey, there's some preliminary activities, and the data migration comes into place, and then we will have some ramp-up activities before we can hand over the system back to the business users. So, Koustubh, what is still missing in regards to cutover and downtime? What do we need to tell our audience?
One important aspect to consider here is, if you look at the 3, coming back to the transition options, when you look at a system conversion scenario, the entire ECC system goes down when you're going for a conversion, which is not really the case if you're going for a new implementation scenario, because you're starting a system from scratch. You identify business units or company codes that should go live, and only those go down in an ECC or whatever source system is, and the data is migrated. In case of a system SDT or a selective data transition scenario, it's really important to understand that since we are migrating data by selecting at a table level, the entire source ECC system has to go down, because when the system goes down, the users are locked, interfaces are shut down, batch jobs are stopped, and then the data selection happens from the ECC system, and then the data gets migrated into S/4HANA. So there is a full system downtime that is required. Now, when we talk about a system downtime, which impacts, there is a business downtime, because the business users or the affected satellite systems are not able to interact with your ECC system. And this aspect definitely needs to be rehearsed as part of a mock cutover exercise. And this is where a business downtime, how much of a business downtime is essential, possible for customers. What we have seen, customers specifically in the retail industry, cannot really have a 48-hour or a 72-hour downtime because they have their retail stores connected to an ECC system. And in this case, downtime aspects are extremely critical. This is definitely something that needs to be identified upfront, how much downtime is possible, and then performance optimization measures are required to be taken during the course of the project to really measure each and every activity, starting the time the system ramps down, data migration, transformation happens, downtime validation happens, and the system is ramped up. So cutover, planning, and then rehearsing it in a dress rehearsal, followed by the actual go live and a complete detailed planning and execution of downtime, definitely one of the key critical success factors to make a smooth go live.
But as mentioned before in the wave concept, it's possible to make a snapshot of the source system and just make a downtime for the selected company codes.
Yes.
That can work.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then that would also have some complexities, for example, the affected company codes is still down and the others are possible if it's, and then if you want to bring them back on sync. So obviously those are project specific complexities that have to be looked at.
More complex than the other ones.
Absolutely.
And Klaus, at the very beginning, you said, hey, sometimes we have SAP systems holding 50, 60 terabytes of data. It's not possible to bring them over in a small downtime, so we need to slice them into phases. One key question is, from my point of view, still open. What's the typical downtime of an SDT project? Does it take a week, a month, 5 days? So what's the usual duration for the cutover?
A weekend.
A weekend. Koustubh?
Yep. That's how much our customers allow us that to do this go live over a weekend, and shut the business users shut down, maybe go for an early Friday afternoon.
Exactly.
IT kicks in, starts the ramp down activities, services comes in, works on the data migration, business users come in, do the downtime validation, ramp up activities start, and business users are back either Sunday night or Monday morning. So weekend of downtime is what we get. This is what our customers expect.
Exactly.
What we hope to get.
Yeah.
But as you said, in the end, downtimes of more than a weekend is something that we usually do not see out there. And we are quite good in optimizing performance and really moving all the data transformation stuff into that weekend so that it will work in the way that we do not affect the normal ongoing business from Monday to Friday. So that's quite a big benefit compared to classical new implementations where you probably need days to bring over master data and that stuff without all the transactional data that we bring over.
But what we also do is we try to avoid year end. We try to find the best way how to do the downtime. Let's find a nice weekend in the middle of the year. Let's find a nice weekend where no auditors are in house, where it's no year-end closing, no monthly closing. Let's find a nice weekend.
Absolutely.
Okay, and all weekends are nice normally.
Okay.
So it's not about going live with the end of the year. We already mentioned that. So usually just pick the weekend that fits most for you. In some cases, when we talk about European customers, we often go for Easter, or where we really have 2 days that we have some buffer that's possible. But in the end, we are completely free in defining the cutover date. So that's another benefit here. Okay, guys, so I think we made it. That was what we prepared for today. And now we are moving over to the Q&A part. So we are looking forward for some questions from the audience that we would like to answer for you.
All right. Thank you very much for this very insightful talk. For all these details, you can hear a lot of experience out there. And I saw a lot of questions coming in via Q&A tools. So I'm not sure whether we can cover all of them, but maybe Benjamin or Koustubh, would you like to give a short summary? What kind of questions came up?
So Koustubh, will you start? I'm just answering the last question and then.
Yeah, I can start for sure. Thank you. So yes, we had received a lot of questions. I can see 16 questions that came up. To summarize, there were questions about the difference between mix and match, new implementation, And system conversion, shell conversion, what type of data can be migrated in which scenario. I think that was also explained pretty in a detailed fashion in the slide that we presented on amount of master data, historical data, transaction data, configuration about which data aspects can be migrated and transformed in which of the scenario. And I think we will share the slide as well. I think there were discussions on whether which transition scenario is applicable for S4HANA RISE. So all transition options can be possible for S4HANA RISE. There were questions also on the percentage of customers choosing system conversion versus new implementation. I think the majority of the customers still go for system conversion. That's the fastest and the most popular standard option available for customers. But recently, we have also seen a lot of customers increasingly going for the selective data transition because it allows speed to transition, at the same time allows process changes, filtering of data, data transformations. So the demand for selective data transition has been increasing significantly. Anything you want to add, Benjamin, Klaus?
I think you wrapped it up perfectly. So
Yeah,
I'm good.
it's fine. Yeah, it's fine for me.
I can see three more questions arrived in the chat. We have very active audience today. So should we go one by one?
I think the first one needs to be answered by SAP itself.
So
Yep. Any reason SAP seems to be releasing more for public cloud than other options? Seems biased towards pushing companies to offer public. Well, I mean, the strategy so far has been, we have a grow program for public cloud customers, and the intention of grow program is primarily for net new customers who are moving from non-SAP environments into SAP public cloud. Obviously, being a cloud company in general, and the focus for SAP has always been to motivate our customers to move into cloud environment, so which is also applicable in case of public cloud. Private cloud is definitely a very realistic and a possible option. Like most of the existing ECC customers seem to transition to S4HANA private cloud edition, leveraging the RISE program, moving into the cloud environment on private cloud. So another important aspect is majority of the innovations coming up are in the cloud environment. All of the innovations in future from SAP will be in the cloud environment. So that's also a push from SAP for customers to move into cloud in general.
okay, thank you for that. The next one on silent data transition to minimize downtime.
Yeah, I can try to answer that one. So silent data transformation is a technology used to upgrade your SAP system from one release to the other release in the background. So it's a different approach than doing a selective data transition approach. And I think what you are referring to is what we call near zero downtime options. And this is really keeping up your old SAP system up and running during the data migration starts, and then move over to the data over to the new SAP S4HANA system. And that's the technology that we massively use when it comes to high amounts of data and short downtimes, and this really shrinks down the needed downtimes. And this is really helping to do this thing in less than a weekend. And in the webinar you saw or you heard, customers with potential downtimes of 8 hours for the data migration itself. So usually when we do something like that, then near zero downtime comes into the game. It's making things more complex. So that's an approach that can be used. But if we can make it without that technology, then we're always good to go without a near zero downtime approach. And in the end, this is something that needs to be discussed during the preparation phase of the project. How much downtime do we really have? Not what's the downtime that you wish to have. So what can you really afford as a company moving without or living without SAP, being online, and then we can tailor the migration activities into this time slot.
All right, thank you for that. The next one is how much time will it take for system conversion project?
I think Benjamin answered this in one of the chats already. It typically takes 10 to 15 months. Again, if it's a really small system, could be less as 6 months. But on an average, we have seen 10 to 15 months is a pretty common time duration that we have seen for system conversion scenarios.
Right, thank you for that. The next one is about SDT or greenfield. How would interfaces or custom code migrate it? Would it be through transport, post data, and validations on any alternative tools path available?
No, I would say from this point of view, greenfield means implementing a new system, and then you have to switch the interfaces. That's why we say, okay, let's make a combination. That's why we say, okay, let's make a combination in the middle between green and brown. That means let's copy the interfaces, let's copy the repository, set up the new system, and then it's easier. And then change the system. Because when the system is empty, without data, we can change it. We can change it in any shape we want. And that's the most important, let's say, benefit of running approach, what we are doing with SDT. Keep the best, transform the rest.
All right, thank you for that. So with this, I can't see more questions in the chat. If someone still have one, then now is the absolutely last chance because we are 2 minutes over the time and I don't want to keep you longer than necessary. Although, of course, I'm always glad to have all the participants with us. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Benjamin, Koustubh, and Klaus, for sharing all these insights, for helping to spread the knowledge to our customers and to our partners to actually make transformations more successful. So this applause goes to you as speakers. And for our audience, thank you very much for being with us, for being so patient and also so interacting so much with us. Stay tuned. Next week, we will have a session on 27th of November. It's Wednesday. Usually we are on Tuesday, but there is some time conflicts. So we will be again live on stage on Wednesday, 27th of November, and we continue with selective data transition specific topics, and we'll have another set of expert speakers next week. So join us. We will be very happy to welcome you. With this, thank you very much. Let me stop the recording.